Okay, well, first slot ended up like shit, and I started flicking a few of the loose stitches, and she just unravelled like a heap of shit. Hasn't fully unravelled though. You may notice I'm wearing what looks like a feminist beanie. Interesting. I'll explain that in a second, and how that these little quote-unquote catsies beanies aren't actually something that's specially made. It's a fuck-up, covered up, that's then given a new feature. Oh, look, it's cat's ears. You know, honestly, it's not as glorious as it may sound. It's marketing a fuck-up, basically. Which, you know, when you think about it, that's feminism in general. But anyway, marketing a lie. But anyway, looking at all the instructions here, blah, 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 you know, and this is to try and basically cast off, basically to get it to release from the machine. And it's sitting there, you know, and you've been turning the handle clockwise, and it says slowly turn the handle and blah, blah, blah about the lowering needle. If you turn the handle, the lowering needle's on the right if you turn it clockwise, like you usually do. And then they're showing these pictures when my camera stops moving around like shit. There's the friggin' feeder there and there. So they're doing it on the left, which means the lowering stitches must be on the left when they're usually on the right. So I assumed that that meant that you turn it backwards. So I thought, well, I'm not going to turn it backwards straight up. And I realised that I could actually fit the little needle through the little prongs there, so I started boom, 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 and I just worked me way around manually without turning the handle. And then you get further down. Next step. Turn the handle clockwise, it says. And then your item is finished and all stitches are cast off. So somehow the lowering needle's changed sides, so I assume you wind it the opposite way. But it doesn't say that, it just says slowly turning the handle. No indication that you should be turning the handle the opposite way until you look at the picture and then just assume that you must be. And then it says turn it the normal way and it'll release it. Well, I ended up flicking it all off by hand without turning shit. So it sort of worked, but then between, so your thread has come out of this notch and then you're supposed to thread it alternatively through every second other one. And of course you end up missing 3 or 4 stitches because it's just gone down. That one's still up, this one's down. It's just been pulled down by this one, but then it's showing it as though you're doing it. See, this thing here is that business, and it's showing that you're doing it from the left. So you've just jumped from here to here and missed about 4 or 5 stitches, which then causes it to unravel when you finally get it off. I realised at this point, when this was confusing me, that I probably should go to YouTube and see how they do it. But no, sometimes I've got that I will work this out myself if it's going to kill me attitude, and that's what I've done. And yeah, well, you know, there's times where you got to try and save things even though they're half buggered to give you a shit garment versus just a god-awful tangle of rubbish that's probably going to end up in the bin. I might be able to unravel that or give it to me mum, she might be able to. I also sort of forgot to put on the so-called weights until later. Not that these are really weights, they're just little clips, but we don't have a great deal of stuff. But the other ones have actual little cast iron weights on little steel hooks that you can, well, some of them you can hook directly onto the stitches, and yeah. Or they've got a, you know, a clamp, and then you hook your little weight directly onto the hole in the bottom of your clamp there. Yeah, well, you're supposed to do that after 3 centimetres. Of course, I don't read that until I've done like fucking, you know, something like 10 or 12 centimetres. But anyway, back to how this little shitstorm come. Yes, I got the ears in the right place. What this actually is, instead of, gently and slowly sort of, working on bringing it all together or anything like that and hiding the end with a pom-pom on top or whatever, this does stretch quite dramatically. This is straight wool. Now, I know for a fact in the real world that real wool doesn't really stretch very much if you get individual strands of it. But because of the way the knitting pattern is, the way it all zigzags through each other, it's a bit like using sewing machine, like having a sewing machine switch to zigzag when you're doing stretch material. It'll sort of, it's like a scissor lift. It can, the scissor lift can go up and it can go down, but the actual length of all the beams that make up the scissor don't change length at all, even though it can lift, well, I've been on one that's lifted 2.5 stories. No, actually, I was on one that went more than 3 stories tall once while I was plastering, and, the length of no beam has changed at all, but you've got that scissor lift effect with zigzag stitches inside spandex when you sew normal solid thread into spandex, not woolly nylon, which is stretch thread. I think that's probably the best analogy I've ever, the best explanation I have ever come across, and I've only just thought of it just now after months of doing it and not really realising that effectively it's like a scissor lift. But this thing is the same, and in that you sort of get a bit of stretch. But really speaking, this was those last few stitches that sort of buggered up, and I thought, you know what? I've spent long enough getting a sore enough arm on this. I'm not losing this damn thing. We're going to make something of it. So, like I said, you can go to the sewing machine. So I just went to the sewing machine, put it in, and started to go, and it didn't seem to move very far, and then I realised it's a bit like organza or chiffon. You put it in, it doesn't really want to move far because the feed dogs have trouble, gripping. And the long and short of it is that just like chiffon or organza, if it has trouble feeding initially, you sort of start pulling the back, and you don't pull too hard, but you just put that tension on pulling the back, and it'll feed through fairly well. And I could see that it didn't want to feed too well with the first few stitches. You look at it and it doesn't move as far as normal fabric should move, and then you realise it's having trouble and you're going to need to pull the back. So I put it in, I realised it was having a little bit of trouble, and then pulled it through, and off we went. And what's the result? Well, only because I don't have a square head, I have a curved head, but you've got a square top. You end up with these little so-called kitteny frickin' things. And I'd sort of just clean that up with the scissors and chop the top off. But yeah, and I know, it's sort of a little bit open there at the top. Theoretically I could go back and do another run and hold it together. Or there's certain ways you can, like, get some yarn and get that giant needle again, and you sort of zigzag from one side to the other, and then pull it tight and it closes the top up. But the only reason it looks like flaming cat's ears, this side here is shorter than that side, but really speaking, the only reason it looks, hang on a second, the only reason it's going to look like these cat's ears is because your head's round, but you just sewed flat. And as a result, you have these 2 little ears that sort of sit up, and I can feel them sitting up. And you guys can probably see them sitting up. So there you go. It's not some miracle to try and make one of these cat's ears beanies, but I'll just state that I don't feel like I'm a feminist, and I'm just wearing a beanie because I'm trying to salvage this second attempt shitstorm that I made with inadequate instructions, and it's something that is going to keep my head warm when I'm in bed at night. Yeah, like I've worn this one here. This is one that a woman who's now dead. She died quite a few years ago. Ended up making this, and although it looks fairly well made, and it is bloody well made, I cop quite a bit of shit about wearing a tea cozy on my head from my boss, wearing that one. So sure as hell, if I can't wear a good one at work without people cracking, well, not people, just one person cracking stupid jokes about it, I'm sure as hell not wearing that mess of a thing I just so-called finished. It's like everything, you know, when you first have a go. You know, this shirt, once you got this shirt on, it's not too bad, but trying to get your arms in the sleeves, God blimey, she's a bit tight on it, and even when you first put it on, it seems a bit tight, and I don't know if it's just, you know, me putting clothes on first thing in the morning, or the clothes being a bit, you know, one certain shape from hanging up drying, but yeah, you sort of end up fitting in after you move in and move around a bit. You sort of snuggle into it, and then you're all right. But you know, the reality is that the other shirt I made, the Dr. Evil shirt, fits like a frickin' glove, except probably a little bit excess in the sleeves. But you know, I'll never have trouble getting that damn thing on. That's yeah, that's gone quite well, actually. I wore it to work yesterday, and I got this thing where, you know, they always say, oh, you got to wash stuff before you first wear it in case of shrinkage, and some of them, you know, you buy all these clothes, wash before you wear it, you know, for the first time and all that, and I'm like, stuff that. I'm going to get dirty in this thing before I'm washing anything. You know, I want to make it dirty or sweaty, and then I'm going to wash it, but I'm not just washing it just straight up. You know, that's stupid. I've got to at least get a bit of dirt on this stuff, or a bit of sweat impregnated into the fabric. And long and short of it is I wore that one yesterday, and then I come to learn what the difference between breathable fabric and non-breathable fabric. And I know when you get cheap fabric, it sometimes isn't breathable, and holy smoke, this stuff was not breathable. And with this stuff I've got on here, and especially the stuff that's the underneath stuff, the checkered stuff, the plaid stuff, whatever you want to call it, you know, you can put your mouth up to it and suck air through it quite easily. And I try to do that just by holding my sleeve up to my lips while I was sitting on the forklift at work, and try to suck air through, and it was a bit of a tight suck. And it turned out that fabric is not very breathable, but that's what you get when you only pay, you know, $2 a metre, which works out about $1.50 US a metre. You can't expect much. Although this blue stuff costs the same price, and that's a lot better. But, you know, this is the thing. All the dregs end up in the cheap section, don't they? So anyway, the stuff also, at the end of the day, I could smell a bit of that stale petrol smell. That's real comforting at the end of the day as well. And just from sort of the bottom of the shirt. And yeah, so I got a feeling that stuff's been processed, and I haven't given a shit about any residues or any bullshit left in there. And of course, because polyester comes from petrochemicals, there's probably some bloomin', you know, resiny crapola or some bloomin' residue left behind from the manufacturing process, and you sort of get the feeling when you smell that maybe you should have washed it before you wore it. This polyester, the blue stuff though, that's actually surprisingly good. And the first wash it let out a little bit of blue dye, but not much. But you didn't get any strange smells with this. So yeah, it's probably been manufactured with a bit more attention to, you know, not leaving residues behind. But anyway, that's the first little attempt. Well, the second attempt there, and I have a lot to bloody learn still, that's for sure.